So I've been wanting to do an episode about this for a while. It's come up a couple times, and Cub and I talked about it. It's this thing called Wabi Sabi. Hard to explain what it is. I've heard it explained or described as a Japanese artistic concept and philosophy. That sounds pretty good to me. Also, a Japanese worldview. The idea is about embracing the beauty of imperfect things. That's another kind of, phrase that I've heard. There's another phrase that comes up a lot. It goes, nothing lasts, nothing is finished, and nothing is perfect. So when you kind of put all that stuff together, you can kind of imagine sort of what it is, but I'll dive in a little bit deeper. But, well, let's see. Let's think about some of the things that I've seen. So I've seen pictures where they're describing Wabi Sabi, and there's like, I think I've probably even brought this up before, but you know, you're like spinning pottery on that fucking wheel thing, and it's supposed to be like a perfect shape. And so like a Wabi Sabi bowl that somebody took a picture of was like, it got dented, but they finished the project and sort of embraced that piece of imperfection on there. And so then I've also seen a lot of pictures of people showing, things like getting weathered and the paint kind of chipping off of stuff, and like wood that's been in the elements for many years, and just sort of like embracing the beauty of those kinds of things. I learned about this, I think in about, somewhere 99 or 2000 or something. And it was when I was in college. And I don't remember when I incorporated it into my graph, but it was in the recent years. So maybe within 3-4 years ago. So I wrote a bunch of stuff down and wanted to kind of go over with you. And I think if you give this a try and just at least embrace or incorporate some of these kind of philosophies into your work, it could help you find some new aesthetics to fuck with. And then also for me, one of the biggest things that it did for me was it made graffiti more fun. And so I'm going to jump into that. So, I always followed the sort of try to get it as clean as possible. When you grab a spray can off the shelf and the cap you use, obviously it's kind of fuzzy and it has like just a sort of not clean kind of look. And then we started using caps that got these like real crisp lines, and kind of the goal was to get the lines to look like as clean as they would be if you had tape on them, just really this goal of constantly, it's almost like you're constantly trying to make it look like it wasn't done with spray paint, like in a way, outside of like blends and stuff. But for me, it just kind of felt like we're taking out not all of them, but a lot of the imperfections that come with spray paint, these sort of fuzzy lines, drips, and, shit like that. Over time, I always tried to paint really clean. In the 90s, I did this. And then as I grew older, I think I got even more crazy about it because the paint got better and you were even more capable of doing all kinds of different stuff. And well, I don't know if capable is the right word, but the paint is just better. So, I mean, I find it easier to do that kind of stuff, really clean stuff. Obviously, you got a really nice valve that's soft and controllable and all these kind of things. And so after a while, I'm sitting there trying to make my stuff clean. And then I was like really into pieces that just had all these like cutbacks and just sharp little edges, and everything had to be perfectly sharp. And so I would sit there for, I'd finish my piece and probably sit there for like an hour and a half to 2 hours or something, just going in and like just shaping things and cutting and doing all this, like trying to get all the corners to be perfect and everything. After a while, it started to become less fun because for me, and I've talked about it a bunch of times, like I don't really like to spend a whole lot of time painting. So I kind of wanted to just be done. And so by the time I get into that whole phase of like trying to clean up every little corner and every little sharp edge and getting everything all perfect, my momentum and energy and just sort of general interest in finishing the thing was kind of gone by that point. So it became this like labor intense kind of process that I just really didn't like. And I think I might have brought this up on the show before, but one of the turning points for me, it was kind of interesting, and it was this weird interaction that I hadn't even thought about. It was my friend Reno from AWR. he was watching me paint, and he came up and he said something like, why are you still cutting up your shit, man? It's been clean for like an hour and a half. You know, in my mind, it was like, well, no, not to me. You know, I saw all these little things and that I wanted to clean up. And I feel like that weird little interaction was maybe a turning point for me to be like, you know what? He's right. What am I doing? Like spending all this time doing all this shit. I think it was probably around then when I really started trying to do other things. And it kind of started with trying to get sharp points or sharp enough to where I was happy with it without having to do cutbacks. And there's a level of skill involved in that. And you have to kind of develop a skill to be able to like get those corners sharp, but you can never get them as sharp as you would if you went in and cut it really sharp. But anyway, I'm kind of getting off track a little bit. But so I started incorporating it at that point, you know, and I started developing this skill where I was like, all right, I need to kind of retailor my style a little bit to where I don't have to go back in and clean up all these corners. Maybe there's something I can do where I'm happy with the sort of, you know, when they're sharp from when you're looking at them from a distance, but if you get up close, you can tell that they're not the kind of corners that gets cleaned up. And so as I was doing that, I started getting more and more into that and kind of able to finish my pieces faster because I didn't have to go through that whole fucking cleanup process. And so after a while, what it ended up starting doing is, you know, there's a level of being self-conscious when you do a piece. If you're trying to get it as clean as possible, and you sort of kind of miss your highlight a little bit, or something doesn't end up as clean as you want, or maybe you overlap something you didn't want to overlap, and you get kind of self-conscious. You're like, fuck, man, like you kind of feel like everybody's going to look at that one part right there. And so by kind of incorporating this into my work, I started being less and less self-conscious about that stuff because it was all just sort of part of the experience, and it was part of the work, and these kind of imperfections. And maybe this highlight doesn't perfectly hit the edge of the outline the way I wanted it, or maybe I cut into the border a little bit more than I wanted to here, or whatever. Started making me less self-conscious about that kind of stuff. And, you know, I do a lot of content on social media, a lot of educational type stuff. And as I was incorporating this became the way that I painted. So when I would do those videos, that was in there as well. So you'd get a lot of these, like, I don't even know if these people even wrote, but like a lot of times people are like, oh, your fucking can control sucks. And it would kind of bother me, you know, and I'd be like, what the fuck, man? You can't tell that I'm doing this on purpose, you know? And so embracing this and then putting it out there, it actually kind of helped me to start to give a fuck less about what other people think. And I'm way further along now to where it's like, I do shit on TikTok, which is like a weird platform, obviously. And so I get these kids that go on there and they just straight up call me a toy. And I'm like, you know, obviously I would have cared about that at one point in my life, but I just don't anymore. It's like, and I feel like this might have been part of getting to that place. You know, I've always wanted to get to that place where I'm like, not really concerned about what other people think. There's a small handful of people in this world whose opinion I really value. And you know, everybody else, it's kind of just whatever. Like, I have respect for everyone and all this stuff, but your opinion is not going to change the way I do things one way or the other. Not you specifically, but, you know, just people in general, especially just like anonymous people on the internet, and you can't even see their shit anyway. So I don't know. I kind of went off on that a little bit, but anyway, so back to what I was talking about. Another way that it helped me, it's kind of related to everything I was just talking about. It's really kind of gave me a feeling of being free from all of the traditional graffiti expectations, you know? So when you start painting, like, there's this expectation, like, you got to do your shit clean, and it's got to be this, and it's got to be that. And if you don't have this, you know, your blend's nice, and whatever expectations that you've heard people put on you. Incorporating this into my work personally, it started making me feel more free from that stuff and allowing me just to make the kind of graph that I want to make, and really just focusing on being happy with it for me. And, you know, we're putting it out in the public, so obviously there's an element to where you want other people to like it too, but at the same time, the most important thing for me, well, a couple things. Number one, was it fun? That's my top priority is making sure that I enjoy the process. And then the other priority is if I liked it, if I'm happy with it, if it's up to the standards that I'm trying to achieve, you know? So those are a few ways that it helped me. I'm sure if I really dug in, I could think of a whole bunch of other ones, but those are some things for you to think about if you're dealing with any kind of the shit I was just talking about. This could be something you could play with to see if it helps you. As I was kind of writing this up, I had some thoughts and some things that I'd learned along the way as I'm incorporating it. One thing that I learned and I corrected was it started to become a crutch. And what I mean by that is like I was sort of relying on this concept of imperfection and all that stuff to be able to not continue to develop the skills of being able to control the can. After a while, you know, those long, intimidating lines, you know, everybody has those in their piece where like when you're painting and you're like, oh man, when I have to outline this part, that's going to be tough. And so when I incorporated this whole Wabi Sabi thing, it kind of took all that shit away because I was no longer even doing those lines as you normally would. So like, imagine just a really long line that you have to hit in this precise way, or maybe there's a curve or it curves around or whatever that is. So for me, when I was doing this kind of Wabi Sabi style, I would just kind of slop in my outline and just be like, cool, it works like that. And then I started thinking, I'm like, you know what? Your skills are perishable. So if you don't continue to use them, they're going to go away. So it's kind of like anything in life. You know, you could get into the best shape of your life. And then if you decide to not go to the gym for 3 months, all of that stuff that you built up, I don't know that it's going to be gone, but it's definitely going to diminish. So it's the same shit with graph and same shit with the skills that you develop in your can control. So when I started realizing I'm using this Wabi Sabi thing as a crutch, I don't have to do any of those tough things anymore. And so my correction was to start doing things with precision and then kind of add in some of that stuff later. So I don't know if it necessarily breaks. I guess Wabi Sabi probably doesn't have rules and shit, but if you're intentionally adding imperfections and stuff, are they really imperfections? I don't know if it really I don't know. Hopefully my question makes sense because I'm having a hard time articulating it. But so anyway, instead of relying on it to not have to do all of those hard things, I decided to go in and do those hard lines and make sure that I still had the skills to be able to control the can and get the line quality clean and sharp if that's what I wanted to do. But then once that was all kind of laid in, then I would come back in with like a pocket cap or, a needle cap or something like that and just finish my outline. Cause I've never done the kind of outline where you just do it one time and then it's done. Like my outlines have always been like the first outline is kind of like laying the foundation. Then I'll go in and thicken it up and do all of this kind of stuff. So I still like doing that. So what I was doing was making that first outline be as clean as I could possibly do it and as precise as I could do it. And then when I go in to finish my outline, I'll go in and just kind of be more loose and kind of free with it. So that way I'm still at least maintaining those skills and potentially improving some of my skills with can control and still being free to use this philosophy or whatever it is. I don't even fucking know how to describe it. But I could still use all of that stuff to kind of be free and loose and, just enjoy myself. And like if a drip happens, I just leave it. Or if I miss something, I leave it. All of these kind of things. So I feel like it's really important to develop those skills before you really start to use this. I mean, or as you use it. I mean, I guess if you're a new writer, I think it might not be a good idea to go in and just not give a shit about all that stuff, because I think it's valuable to have those skills with a can. I mean, everybody's on their own fucking path. So if it's not something that's important to you, then what I'm saying, is not relevant. But for me personally, I feel like developing good, strong can control is always going to be a valuable skill for you as a graph writer. So you can still develop all of that stuff and still have this kind of freedom of embracing imperfections, embracing asymmetry, all of these kind of things. So those are my thoughts about it. And then I have some action steps for you if you want to try this. So number one, the first thing I thought of is like, try letting go of some of those rigid expectations that we were talking about. Like there's these sort of expectations as a graph writer that, certain things are going to be a certain way, and it's possibly different in different regions. So your community's expectations on you may be different than what I was used to. But whatever those are, one step that you can take is to start trying to free yourself of those things. So one example is like when I was coming up, we always wanted our highlights to be perfectly against the edge of the outline, if that's the style of highlight that you're doing, of course. I remember many times when I would miss that highlight, I would have to go in and erase the highlight and try it again. So one thing I think you could do is potentially just, if that's like one of them, or you can pick something that's similar to that, just leave it there and try to make it and be comfortable. Can you leave that kind of imperfection on your piece and still be happy with it and still not focus in on that? So that's one thing I think you could try. So the next one came up in the discussion that Cub and I had. I don't remember the episode number, but I think it was called Finding Inspiration. Wabi Sabi came up in that. And we started talking about highlights. And a lot of us have this sort of rigid idea that the highlights have to be, like say you choose they're going to be in the top right corners of all of your shit. Then you have to put them there every single time. So every top right corner angle and all this kind of shit is where the highlights go. And Cub was even saying, he's like, that's how I've always done it. It was like sacrilege to put a highlight anywhere else other than the top right, if that's the side you chose. I mean, some people highlight top left or bottom left, whatever. Doesn't matter which one you choose, but whatever one you choose, the sort of expectation is that you stay with that. And so one of the things that I did, and I learned this through doing 3D animation and 3D modeling and stuff, I started to learn that that's not really how it works. Highlights on objects, especially like 3D objects or objects in space in general, they're reflecting all kinds of different things. And so if you're thinking about something that's outside in the elements, there doesn't necessarily have to be one light source. It doesn't have to be a light source that's reflecting down on the top left of an object. So when I started thinking about that, I was like, you know what? I should just do highlights wherever I want. Like maybe I choose top left, but maybe there's another light source somewhere else in the scene that's highlighting a small area, and when I was working in 3D, there could be a big light source that's casting these highlights on the top left of everything. But then there's other smaller light sources or other smaller bright objects in the scene that are potentially highlighting little small areas here and there. So I started putting in highlights, in other places. So I would get in my top left or whatever, or top right, or I don't know, whatever that is, whatever side you choose. But then I would start going, okay, I want to pop out this part of the letter here. And that's technically not where a highlight's supposed to go, but I'm going to put a small one here anyway, maybe put a little bit of a little texture on it or something like that. And as I was doing it, I started really embracing that. And so that's what I do now. I mean, if I'm doing those style of highlights, I'll put highlights anywhere I feel that they would look cool or really bring out the piece. If you just go outside and look around and imagine that your piece is reflective, anything that's around a car could be reflecting a bit of light off of a bumper, and that could be hitting your piece on the bottom left side, and your pieces are on the top right. Your highlights are on the top right. Technically, in the real world, that would possibly create a highlight in another weird little spot. So hopefully that makes sense. But that was definitely something that really helped me enjoy myself more, is being able to do that kind of stuff. So another one that I found really helpful is just in general loosening up when I paint, like I was saying earlier, when I would just be so rigid, and everything would just be all tight and stuff. So like I really found myself like I'm talking about physically, literally tensing up like my body, my muscles and shit. As I started embracing this, I was like, man, I got to loosen up and just kind of just have a lot of fun, you know? So I tried to do that, loosen up physically and mentally. So I don't know, they go together. So I would just sort of like try to feel relaxed physically and then just relaxed mentally and just really embrace this idea that like, hey, this shit's going to come out how it's going to come out. I'm going to do the best I can and I'm going to have a good time and whatever happens, happens. And honestly, I paint better when I'm in that frame of mind than when I'm really tense. You know, like I get pretty tense, especially, and I've talked about this a few times, but like there's always a point in the piece where I'm just like, I'm legitimately concerned that it's not gonna come out. You know, I'm like, oh man, this isn't looking like it's gonna really come together. You know, and like I'm trying to like, I still get that every single time I paint, 100% of the time. I don't know if it's 100, but honestly, I can't remember ever painting that I didn't have this feeling where I'm like, fuck, I hope really when I start putting those last details, it really comes together. Cause right now I'm not feeling it, you know? So this definitely helps me in that regard. You know, like I do have to remind myself, hey, just don't worry about it. Just loosen up, take a breath, just fucking get it. Let's see what happens. Another thing that's really simple is just don't correct your drips. Just fucking let them happen. I do a lot of drips on purpose now, but like one of the early things that I did was I was like, I'm not gonna fix drips anymore, even if I'm going for a really clean piece. I remember it was just like the worst thing ever because like you'd get a drip and you'd run up to the wall and you'd like blow on it so that the drip would kind of push back up and then you'd kind of clean it up a little bit or whatever. Even sometimes holding my finger under the drip to stop it, you know, it was like this big deal. Like, oh my God, I don't want to have any drips on my piece. And so one of the things that I did early on, even when I was painting clean, I was like, I'm just going to leave that. Like, that's kind of part of using spray paint, you know, like it just sort of felt like not having those there when they naturally occur. I don't know. It started feeling just kind of like not right to me. Like, just let it happen. So that's one simple thing that I did. So then the last thing, and this is something that I've been really enjoying, was like really playing with textures and things like asymmetry and all this kind of stuff. Like I used to just really want to like have everything filled in really precise and all this kind of shit. And lately I've been kind of like ghost filling stuff in and just sort of seeing how it comes together where you can still see some of the fill-in lines and stuff like that. And I'm starting to really like to see that texture, and it kind of reminds me of, you know, when you look close at an oil painting or something, you know, like more on the regular art side, and you can see kind of like the texture of the brush, you know, and like it just kind of feels cool to be able to see like, hey, that's where that person really turned the brush right there, and you can kind of see the brush strokes and stuff. With spray paint, you know, we have the ability now to like make everything look so crisp that it looks like, you know, you did it on an iPad or some shit, and the blends are perfect and all the lines are super crispy and everything's filled in perfectly, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I've been kind of playing lately where I just don't fill it in all the way, or like some spots just have a little bit of a ghost fill, and then I'll be laying on textures over top of it. And I'm finding that actually kind of, it sort of adds to the piece, at least for me, and in my opinion. That could be something you could just see if you could embrace those things and just allow those things to happen. So that's all I got. Hopefully it was helpful, and you know, really appreciate everybody's support. If you like what you're hearing, I would really appreciate it if you told somebody about it or shared it, whatever that looks like to you. I'm trying to grow this thing and could definitely use some help. So please feel free to do that. Hope you're all doing well, and thank you for listening. All right, good.
Appreciate each and every one of you guys who are supporting the cause and continue to spread the love. And yeah, stay up.